She is an actress and writer. Her super popular acting class has been a rite of passage for so many actors coming out of Santa Fe and Albuquerque. The films she's written, A Thousand Voices and Defending the Fire, have won awards and gone on to play all over the country and have been huge hits locally. She serves on the board of the nonprofit Silver Bullet Productions. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the show, Maura Studi. Hey,
Thank you,
Maura.
Jock. For, as my dad would say, that illustrious eulogy.
Maura, you're like 12 years old, and your father, Jack Albertson, wins the Academy Award for, the Best Supporting Actor Academy Award in 1968. For the subject was roses. Do you have any memories of that night as a preteen?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I mean, I was there. My dad took me to the awards along with my mother, and it was very exciting. And it also happened to be the award show where Katharine Hepburn and Barbara Streisand tied for Best Actress. So it was memorable for that. But it was an amazing experience for my father. He, I had a very unusual childhood and an unusual perspective, at least for these days, of growing up in show business, because my father started in vaudeville and as a hoofer, a dancer, and a straight man. He actually learned to dance on this, corners of Boston where he grew up, with people like Jimmy Cagney and that kind of stuff. So he went into vaudeville and then went into musicals on Broadway. And he also worked at burlesque. So growing up as a child, I hung out with him a lot. We spent a lot of time together. I just loved being around him and all his cronies and just, sitting around listening to all these old vaudevillians and burlesque comics trade jokes. And, they all knew each other's routines, and, it was pretty amazing and very, very funny. You don't see people like that today, because they enjoyed sharing those old routines and just talking about things they've done. And these days I don't see people really doing that much. There's not that camaraderie.
I mean, your father is, I think, one of 8 actors, and all the others are world famous for their ability as an actor. To only, win the Emmy, the Tony, and the Academy Award all in the same year. That's an amazing feat and
well, it wasn't all in the same year, but he's one of the few that has all those awards. Yeah. And he also has a gold record for a cartoon voice he did for Disney.
Yeah.
For The Fox and the Hound.
Now his Broadway career is quite intensive in the 40s. Of course, you're not born to several years later. Can you tell us a bit about your mom and her people?
Oh, okay. Well, so my mother started out as a writer. My mother was quite a lot younger than my dad, and I was born when my dad was, already in his 50s. But my mother started out as a writer for radio and news in New York, and worked for Mike Wallace and wrote some radio dramas. And that's how she met my dad, because he was performing one of the radio shows that she'd written. And she moved out of show business and into political activism. She was a really pretty powerful grassroots political activist for progressive liberal politics in California after we moved there, which is where I grew up. I grew up in Los Angeles, but I was born in New York, and I lived in New York when my dad would go back to do Broadway.
Can you tell us a little more about your mom's political activism?
Oh, well, yeah, she was one of the founders of Women's Strike for Peace in California. And, She went on to be president of the California Democratic Council for many years, which was a grassroots democratic organization. And then she was elected to the community, LA Community College Board of Trustees and the California State University Board of Trustees, where she advocated always for human rights and civil rights for people of color and the LGBTQ community. And then she was president of the board for AIDS Healthcare Foundation for many years as well. And so, that's kind of funny too. There's my father and, because of his and my mother both, because my father had grown up or started as a hoofer too, was always very supportive of the LGBTQ community because, as a hoofer, as a chorus boy, he was surrounded by people with, for that time, alternative lifestyles. And so was always very supportive and was the grand marshal of the gay parade in West Hollywood several times.
That's cool.
So, they were always very active in civil rights movement. And my father also helped right after the March on Selma, there was obviously a great feeling of need for activism to support the civil rights movement. And so my father actually, along with Sammy Davis Jr., helped produce a benefit performance of all the Broadway stars called Broadway Answers Selma to support Martin Luther King and the civil rights movement. So that's, so my mother just continued to be a political and education dynamo.
Gosh, and you must have been a little girl when all this is happening. So I think that kind of, from my experience with you, must have informed a lot about who you are today.
Oh, it totally shaped who I am today. I mean, everything about, my parents and everything. For instance, one thing that I've come to know recently, both my parents are gone, but, just through reading correspondence and what have you, when I was a very small child, my maternal grandmother started a Mexican import store in California. And so my mother would do all the buying in person, drive into Mexico. And as an infant, I would go with her. And then at one point, my family was very worried that my father was going to be blacklisted by McCarthy. And so they were kind of making plans to live in Mexico City, like leave the US and become expats in Mexico City. But luckily, my father was just sort of not officially blacklisted, but on, because of association with probably everybody else that was on the fringe and had a year where he had trouble working, but then it all came back. So that
was that also because he was Jewish, or it was his activism as well, or you think it was his connection to Dalton Trumbo or some of the other friends that were being...
all that was pretty much guilt by association and also guilt by liberal politics, at any time. For instance, I mean, I could say that my dad was in the second, and I think it was the first Broadway production of The Cradle Will Rock, which was a musical on Broadway that supported unions. And so therefore that association was that it was, commie inspired. And a lot of people that were in it and the writer were also, suspected of communist activities, but, that wasn't true. They were just union supporters, which of course, being in the movie business and entertainment is incredibly important. The unions really protect their members, and it makes it possible for people to have a life as a performer.
Yeah, I mean, before that, producers used to be able to drown extras, and that was just part of making the movie.
Right. I mean, and also just the pension and the health care that they set up, and as well as the protections on the job. Make because as Gary can tell you, actors don't work all the time. And sometimes you can go a year or more without doing anything. And the unions have, greatly helped people to survive in the arts. So that's important.
God, and so this is all happening before you were born, and then when you're just a little kid. When did you first become aware of this? That there was the chance that your father could be blacklisted and brought in front of the House Un-American Activities Committee?
I was too young to be aware of that. I was really little. And my parents talked about it a little bit, over the years when I was growing up, but it really wasn't until just recently that I found, going through my mother, who never got rid of anything. So there was, letters and canceled checks going back to the 40s. That I realized that they had actually felt that there was such a threat to my father's livelihood that they were going to have to move to Mexico and, do another kind of business. But luckily it didn't work out that way. But, one of the things that always, to get back to Gary's first question about, when my dad got his award, he was one of the first long-time character actors to get an Academy Award the way he did. Somebody who'd had a long career in every aspect of show business and had been sort of, maybe just overlooked as just a song and dance man, and, not really taken very seriously until he got this opportunity to do The Subject Was Roses, which he did first on Broadway and won a Tony for. And then they made a film of it, which was a very small independent film, really. But they used mostly the original actors from the Broadway production, which included Martin Sheen. That was his first big break in the play. That's how he was really discovered. And, so when my dad won the Academy Award, he would be constantly stopped by all these old cronies of his who had been in vaudeville and burlesque and stuff. And they would say, "Jack, we're so proud of you, getting an Academy Award, because we figure if you can do it, anybody can." But so that's kind of the way it was. But it's always interesting. I think the award really cemented for my father, who had done dramatic plays and roles on television throughout his career, but somehow he just always was thought of as a comedian and a song and dance man, and it really cemented for him a lot of great opportunities after that.
We're talking with Maura Studi, and we'll be right
Maura.
back. Oh, excuse me. We're talking with Maura Studi, and we'll be right back after this.